As I said in the last class, the central theme of this fourth chapter is the doctrine of non-origination. The idea is the absolute reality, the eternal reality, the consciousness, the Atman, is beyond changes, beyond any kind of modification. Now, there are two principles to be kept in mind. When Vedanta philosophy says that something is absolutely real, the idea is that it is eternal, it is changeless, it remains the same throughout the past, present and future. Now Vedanta analyzes the entire creation and divides all that we experience into different levels of reality. At the lowest level, we have experiences. We experience things only as ideas. We don't go through a long experience. Things occur to us in our mind only as ideas. At a higher level, at the second level, this universe, people whom we see in our everyday life, the experiences that we go through in our everyday life, the empirical universe. The empirical universe and our experiences all days are real, but real only in a relative sense. So it is called relativity, real in a relative sense. This is true of our emotions, our ideas, our concepts, and also of the universe, the world in which we are living. See, happiness and happiness, grief, sorrow, joy, and different emotional, mental experiences. They come and they go. They are not unreal because we experience them. But they are not absolutely real because anything to be called absolutely real, it should remain without any change. It should never vanish. It should be changeless. It should remain the same in the past, in the present and future without any modification. Hunger and thirst, happiness and unhappiness, grief and joy, these things come and go. So they are not eternal. They are real only in a relative sense. So also the empirical universe, the sun, moon, everything, they may last perhaps for several millions of years. A happy sensation may last perhaps for a few minutes, hours, sometimes for days. But still, they change. And beyond all this, Vedanta posits what it calls the absolute reality, the eternal reality, which is called consciousness. In Vedanta, it is called Vijnanam in the Yogacara Vijnanavada school of Buddhist philosophy. It is called Shunya or emptiness or voidness in the Shunyavada tradition. And it could be called maybe the experience of the kingdom of God in the Christian tradition or whatever may be. But in Vedanta, this reality is given a universal analysis. This reality is Atman, consciousness. It is not born because anything which takes birth has to vanish. the state of being born itself is a state of transition from a condition of absence to a condition of existence. And it never changes, it never grows, it never evolves, it is eternal. This Atman. Now, this Atman cannot be cause of anything, because when you say that A is the cause of B, it means B comes out of A. So B also should be eternally real, and there cannot be two eternal realities. If a thing is to be called eternally real, it should be one and the same. Now, Vedanta says every human being in this world is essentially this eternal reality, this Atman. I know it is very difficult to grasp, even from an intellectual point of view. It can only be experienced. It can never be intellectually analyzed. See, at the common day-to-day experience level, we look upon ourselves as a physical body. Now, physical body, it is very, very fragile. It is very, very vulnerable. When you travel in the streets, if a thorn pierces through your feet, you feel pain. The whole body becomes painful. So sometimes even an ant bites, then also it could happen. There are some disturbing types of insects. An insect bite can completely upset the balance of body system. This body cannot be eternal. But most people do believe that this body is the only thing to live for. So whole human efforts, energies, all are directed towards making this body perfect, happy, strong, healthy. And what happens? If you live at the bodily level, you can never be free from anxiety, neurosis, depression, or grief. Because there are two types of looking at bodies in Vedanta, of course. One way of looking at the body, we should not get depressed or frightened. Body, after all, what is body? Body is just a bundle made of skin. And we know very well what it really contains. So it is said, body is something which contains things which are fit only to be thrown away the moment it comes out. The human body doesn't contain anything other than the most despicable things that we won't like to touch and then without washing hands. That's what the human body. Vedanta is sometimes very frightening, but really not frightening. It doesn't depress us. It doesn't give a negative picture of human life, because that is very frightening. Swami Vivekananda, while preaching in Vedanta in 19th century, in one context he said, there are two ways of looking upon human life. One is, we have a body with a soul. The body is predominant and soul is just an insignificant part of that body. Atman, soul, consciousness, is a very insignificant part. There is a higher way of looking at ourselves. We are a soul with a body. The body becomes an instrument. Atman or soul consciousness is the honor of this body. Now, there is another way of looking at the body. This body can be divine. This body can become an effective, sublime instrument, a tool for going beyond bodily consciousness. We cannot run out of the body, run away from the body. The human body, human mind can be turned into effective tools and instruments for realizing the highest spiritual truth. All the great spiritual personalities, call them Buddhas, Christ, or anybody, Vivekananda, Ramakrishna Order, Shankaracharya, Muhammad, whoever may be. Anybody, and you name anyone, who had left an eternal mark in the history of human civilization. They all believed that we are a soul with a body. So the body is supreme, the soul, the Atman, the consciousness is supreme, and body is an instrument. Now, if we realize that we are the eternal, absolute Atman consciousness, which is unchanging, which is not subjected to changes, when body goes away, this Atman, according to Vedanta, continues to exist. It doesn't go through the process of decay along with the body. Then body becomes something divine. It becomes a sublime tool, an instrument. So, Vedanta doesn't give a negative picture of human life. Rather, it gives a very positive, a sublime, a beautiful, grand picture. We are not this body. We are something beyond this body, beyond mind. Because mind also creates problems. If we look upon ourselves as just physical or psychological entities, then unhappiness completely upsets our personalities. On the other hand, if we can link our own personality to something which is imperishable, which is always in a state of eternal bliss, which never gets miserable, then we can transcend, we can look beyond the limitations of body and mind. This Atman never undergoes any change. In fact, that idea is stated in the 10th verse of the 4th chapter. That's what we are going to take up. Just establish a link. What am I? Am I just a physical body? Certainly not. Of course, physical body doesn't require intellectual entertainments. And people cannot just be happy by eating good food or taking shelter from the rains and sunlight. Because there are most people, after getting all this, they go to libraries, they go to art galleries, they go and listen to music. Why, if they are just physical bodies, why should they listen to music? Because body doesn't listen to music. And music is not enjoyed by the body, music is enjoyed by mind, and a book on philosophy is enjoyed by the intellect. So we know we are not physical bodies. We are something higher than physical bodies. So we believe that we are intellectual beings, psychological beings, intellectual or psychological entities. Here also there is a problem. If we describe ourselves as psychological, intellectual beings, then also we are vulnerable. Because mind gets happy and unhappy, as I said earlier. Intellect also is not always in a state of happiness or satisfaction or contentment. So anything which gets happy and unhappy, which gets depressed and gets overjoyed, such a thing cannot be absolutely real. Because the absolute reality should be beyond all these fluctuations, changes, emotional swings. So Vedanta says we are something beyond body, beyond mind, beyond intellect. We are the eternal Atman. Now, I would say this is not just a philosophy. It is a great spiritual message that we can practice in our everyday life. The moment people get depressed, if you feel, I am something beyond this body and mind and things like that. So if we can link or connect and establish a link between our personality and the Atman, the eternal reality behind and beyond all this, And if we identify ourselves with this Atman consciousness, which never born and therefore it never dies, is eternal, then we can enjoy peace of mind. Because Atman or consciousness is never disturbed. If the banks collapse, the share markets collapse, mind gets disturbed. If an insect bites, our body gets disturbed. If we are forced to read a book which is totally in which we are not at all interested, in which we are totally disinterested, intellect gets disturbed because we become bored. But behind all this, if we can identify ourselves with the Atman, then we can enjoy peace of mind. There is a verse in the Gita, those who are familiar. In the Gita, there is a verse in the 2nd chapter. There is a long description of a spiritually enlightened person who has reached this level, who is able to connect his personality with this eternal Atman. That person is called Sthita Prajna. Sthita Prajna Yasya Saha. A great spiritually enlightened person whose mind or intellect is in a state of perfect, absolute contentment, which is never shaken, never disturbed. Now there is a picture, a graphic description of how such a spiritually enlightened person lives in this world, acts, moves about, and how he or she interacts with the daily experiences in our everyday life. Arjuna, the disciple, the student of Gita, the student who listens to Lord Krishna, puts a question. The verse is this. I need not go through the verses, but I just quote. Need not. Sthita prajnasya ka bhasha samadhistasya keshava siddhi kim prabhasheda kim asida vrajeda kim. This is a question. Arjuna, let us say a student of philosophy or in spirituality, puts a question to the teacher. How does a spiritually evolved, spiritually enlightened person, how does he talk? How does he move about in this world? How does he interact with the external world, with his fellow beings, with his neighbors? How does he interact to unpleasant experiences? In answer to this, Lord Krishna gives a long description running to 18 verses. But the most prominent verse is this. You think of an ocean, and a number of rivers empty their waters into that ocean. The mighty ocean like Pacific will not be disturbed if 100,000 rivers empty their waters in the ocean. The ocean doesn't go and invite or request the rivers to bring your water into and pour your waters into me. The ocean doesn't request. The ocean doesn't seek. But rivers, by their very nature, empty their waters into the ocean. Ocean remains undisturbed. So, apuryamanam achala pradishtham samudramapa pravishanti yaddut taddut kamayam pravishanti sarve sashantim apnoti na kama kami. In the whole world metaphysical literature, you cannot think of a better graphic description, a more graphic description of how a spiritually enlightened person lives in this world. And Shankaracharya, who has written a great commentary and interpretation of this verse, he says, before giving an extended interpretation of this verse, I shall mention this point, the relevance of this verse and the relevance of the ideas which this verse brings out. The great commentator Shankaracharya says, well, what's the use of reading about the characteristics of a spiritually evolved person? We are not spiritually evolved. We cannot sit quiet. We cannot sit in perfect calmness and contentment. If we have to face problems, we cannot sit like an ocean, Pacific Ocean, sitting undisturbed. If 100,000 rivers empty their waters. So why should we read? What's the use of? What's the practical benefit of this? Shankaracharya says, you read. You may not have reached this level of experience, but there is a practical utility in our everyday life. You try to practice this philosophy of contentment. Try to practice. If you practice and try to acquire these characteristics of a spiritually enlightened person, eventually we will become spiritually enlightened. I can give you an example. When you go to a gymnasium, you do exercise. Well, your goal is to become strong, physically strong. What are the characteristics of physically strong people? Sometimes a muscular wrestler may die by the time he reaches 40th year because of Parkinson's or heart problems. That's a different matter. I'm not going to, they may be physically strong, but health may be terrible. May be suffering from all kinds of problems. Most of these muscular people die very soon. But anyhow, we can forget that part of it. Now, the characteristics of a strong person, that he will have strong muscles. Suppose you go to gymnasium, you need not worry about health or strength. Your purpose is to develop strong muscles. And with that purpose, if you go to gymnasium, eventually you become physically strong. You didn't think about getting physical strength, acquiring physical strength. You are interested only in developing bulging muscles. And every day you go and work hard and you develop bulging muscles. And gradually you become physically strong. Similarly, Shankaracharya doesn't give this example of gymnasium. That is my contribution, of course. No, but Shankaracharya says, these characteristics, which he called Siddhaprajnasya Lakshanani, means characteristics of a spiritually enlightened person, are meant to be practiced sincerely by all spiritual seekers. They need not worry that we have not reached that level of spiritual enlightenment. They need not worry. When we are working in the office, in the factory, in maybe university, wherever maybe, in the farmland, wherever we are, we try to practice this calmness, this contentment, and this state of blissful attitude within us. Slowly we become spiritually enlightened. So if you can sincerely work for, it is not imitation, sincerely trying to acquire the characteristics of a spiritually enlightened person, if you try, you become spiritually enlightened. This is the purpose of giving this long description of the characteristics of a spiritually enlightened person. Now I shall come back to the verse. The verse, as I already recited, is this. Think of an ocean, and a large number of rivers flow and empty their waters into the ocean. The ocean remains unchanged, undisturbed. The ocean doesn't invite the rivers to bring waters. The ocean doesn't seek. The rivers, by their very nature, flow towards the ocean. Similarly, a spiritually enlightened person doesn't seek, is not greedy. He doesn't go out of, he or she doesn't go out of his or her way to acquire anything, but does the duty sincerely, without any attachment, sincerely, with great care, focus and concentration. And then what happens? Whatever happens around doesn't disturb the spiritually enlightened person, just as the rivers do not disturb the ocean. The ocean doesn't seek and search out for rivers and request them to bring waters. Similarly, a spiritually enlightened person does his or her duty with all sincerity and earnestness. But if the results are not up to the expectation, he or she is not disturbed. If the results are beyond expectation, she or he is not overjoyed. That's all. Now, as I said, this word, Jara Marana Nirmuktaha Sarve Dharma Subhavataha. Jara Marana Michandas Chavande Tan Manishaya. This is the verse. The meaning is this. All human beings in this world. Here the word dharma is used. Dharma means jivatma, means individual souls. By our very nature, we are eternal. And that is a special teaching of Vedanta. By our true nature, we are the eternal Atman consciousness. Our true nature. But we have forgotten that. We think we are the physical body, then the smallest physical problem becomes a great dilemma. If we think we are intellectual beings, or emotional or psychological beings, then a great small unpleasant experience makes us disturbed or depressed. But behind and beyond all this, if we link our concept of ourselves, our concept of our idea of what we are, to the Atman, this eternal consciousness behind, we can remain undisturbed. We can work in this world, work in the business, in the industry, in the office, or in any place, do our duty without being disturbed. On the other hand, if we imagine ourselves that we are not really this Atman consciousness, this state is something to be acquired, then there is a problem. In fact, that is one great line of demarcation between Vedanta and all other systems of philosophy, all other systems of theology, whether the three Abrahamic religions or popular Hinduism or Buddhism, anything. In all these traditions, we believe in a state of higher experience. It may be heaven. It may be God's grace, according to Augustine. It may be the concept of moksha or liberation in non-Vedantic systems of popular Hinduism. There, the state of perfection, our true nature, is something to be acquired, something that we have to work for, a gift from God, or the result of our efforts, whatever may be. Either it is a gift from God by His grace, or the result of our actions. Vedanta says it is not a gift from God, it is our true nature. So this verse, this Sanskrit verse says, Subhavataha means by our true nature, we are perfect. Because if perfection or spiritual liberation is a gift from God, no gift can be eternal. If it is a result of our actions and our efforts, that also depends upon the type of efforts we put forth. All efforts, all studies, all prayers are only attempts to regain our true nature. So spiritual liberation Vedanta is a kind of homecoming, regaining what actually belongs to us. It is not a gift, it is not an acquirement, it is something, our true nature. So our prayers, our worship, our religious rituals, reading holy books are very important, very essential, because they try to dehypnotize ourselves. Because we have hypnotized ourselves into thinking that we are the physical body, psychological beings, or intellectual beings. Vedanta says we have to dehypnotize. We have to really understand that perfection or divine bliss is our true nature. So, that's why in Vedanta, of course this is very important to remember, there are 4 important principles which I want to elaborate at this point. That is, it's an important philosophy in Vedanta. According to Vedanta philosophy, spiritual enlightenment, spiritual liberation is not the result of any kind of effort. Like, for example, you work hard to manufacture a pot out of clay. You work hard to manufacture a table or a chair from timber. It's called Utpadya, means something that could be manufactured. Now, the table or the pot, the table that you manufacture from timber, or the clay, or the pot that you manufacture from clay, or the golden ornament that you manufacture from gold. It is the effect of certain activities, deliberate planning and activities. So as a result of your action, you get this you get this effect, either pot or the golden ornament or the table. So it depends upon your effort. And anything which is dependent upon effort, artificial effort, cannot be eternal. Before you manufactured the table or chair from timber, the chair and table did not exist. That means it is non-eternal. It is impermanent. Because the table can be broken, it loses its shape. Moksha or spiritual liberation is eternal. It's our true nature. It is not the result of any kind of effort, artificial effort, any kind of endeavor. Then Vedanta says it is not a result of change of state. Anything which you produce as a result of change cannot be eternal. The Vedanta gives the example, old example. Example is, from milk you get yogurt or cheese, maybe. Vedanta, of course, uses the word milk and curds. You can say, from milk you get yogurt, from milk you get cheese. You cannot say that liberation, spiritual enlightenment is the result of a kind of change. See, milk undergoes change and becomes cheese. Like the Vedanta is not a result of any kind of change in the real state of the cause. And then it says Vedanta is not the result of any kind of refining. See, crude oil, if you refine, you get petroleum, refined products you get. So, Vedanta is not a result of any kind of refining process. And then it is clear Vedanta is not the result of any kind of processing. See, from seeds you get oil. Oil seeds produce oil. Oil comes out of oil seeds by going through a process. Vedanta is not a result of any kind of change, processing, refining, or manufacturing. It is our eternal real state. This is the special characteristics of Vedanta. In all non-Vedantic systems, spiritual liberation is either a gift from God or the result of your hard work, hard endeavor, prayers and so on. Does it mean that prayers and God's grace, all these have no place? No. Vedanta fully recognizes the importance and relevance of spiritual practices like meditation, prayer, surrendering everything to God. All these are accepted. But Vedanta says that beyond all this, it is our true nature. So all spiritual practices, reading holy books, listening to spiritually elevating talks, prayers, All these are essential and necessary for removing the wrong notions that we have accumulated, because now we think we are this body, that we become depressed. All miseries, every kind of human misery that modern man is facing in modern times is, from a psychological point of view, the result of hypnotism, kind of self-hypnotism. And Vedanta wants to dehypnotize, to liberate ourselves from this state of hypnotism. Because we have deluded ourselves into thinking we are the physical body, nothing more. Or we have deluded ourselves into thinking that we are the psychological or intellectual beings. As a result of this, we suffer. That's why Vedanta in a way gives a great message. We have to remember very carefully, sometimes a superficial, if you look at it from a very superficial point of view, sometimes we may get the wrong idea that Vedanta denies the idea of a creator God. The Vedanta denies the views established in theological books. No. Vedanta fully accepts and recognizes all the great truths and ideas presented in all great religious books. When we talk about religious books, you have to remember there are two types of teachings in religious books. The universal, the spiritual, the highly humanistic teachings. The other is the secondary ideas, mostly related to socio-anthropological ideas. See, in every religion, in every religious book you find ideas related to the local culture, language, traditions, customs and habits. Every prophet is burdened by the limitations of the culture and language and history, the geographical characteristics of the area in which that prophet is born. So this may find reflected in his teachings or her teachings. But beyond and above all this, there will be certain universal spiritual teachings that you can find in all religious traditions. Some of the spiritual ideas can be found even in the works of great atheists. That also you'll be surprised to know. Some great spiritual universal ideas can be found even in the works of great agnostic humanists like Bernard Shaw, if you read. He was a great lover of mankind. He was a great champion of peace. Bertrand Russell was certainly not a believer in the creator God. One of his most controversial books and most important books, Why I Am Not a Christian. And Russell was, even now it is recognized as the greatest historian of Western thought. His History of Western Thought is a landmark work. He still is a classic. Of course, he completes the period by 1950s, 1940s, 50s, not beyond that. He passed away within a short time. And one of his most controversial book is Why I Am Not a Christian. And you know, the one religion that he respects, he is an agnostic, almost an atheist. That's why he doesn't recognize the great mystics like Eckhart in his History of Western Philosophy. The one religion that he admired was Jainism. And Jainism is an atheistic religion, mind you. Jain religion doesn't recognize a personal creator God. But it is built upon the philosophy of non-violence. Gandhi got his non-violence ideal only from Jaina religion. Later, Jaina religion got merged into Hinduism. So what I mean to say, this idea of going beyond books but accepting the sublime spiritual teachings of all religious theological books. Going beyond prophets but accepting and respecting all prophets. Going beyond rituals, beyond conventions, but giving them their place, the due place. That is the uniqueness of Vedanta. So Gaudapada here says Jaramarana nirmuktaha sarve dharma subhavataha. Subhavataha sarve dharmaha jaramarana nirmuktaha. That's the prose order. What he says is this: by the very nature, all human beings, all of us, are one with the Atman. We are perfect. We are beyond death. We are beyond life. We are beyond birth, beyond death. Because death means a transition from a state of existence into a state of non-existence. Birth means a transition from a state of non-existence to a state of existence. We always exist, so there is neither birth nor death. Why? Because the Atman behind the body, behind the mind, behind the intellect is eternal, unchanging. That is the sublime idea. It has got a great ethical relevance in modern times. The word is used, dharmaha means, plural is used, but that's only in the secondary sense. Gaudapada says, this Atman is omnipresent, immanent in all beings. The same Atman, the same one Atman or consciousness, it is immanent in all beings. There may be 7 billion mirrors and one sun. This sun may get reflected in 7 billion mirrors. So total human population is today $7 billion. 7 billion, not dollars, 7 billion human beings, The total human population today is 7 billion. So these 7 billion human beings are 7 billion mirrors in which the Atman, one sun, is reflected. So the reality is one, we call by different names. Now, so that is the then Manishaya. Manisha means actually, some people, because of wrong understanding, mistake this Atman to be endured with change, to be born and undergoing the process of death. But in reality, the Atman is eternal, it is birthless, it is deathless. It is beyond the 6 changes: birth, existence, growth, evolution, decay and death. These are the 6 changes which are enumerated in Vedantic tradition. That is, now another, I can give you how this, just an idea, just an example of how such a grand Vedantic ideal influences human civilizations, human culture. Not only our interaction with other human beings. I already gave the example of Gita, Siddhaprajna. Such a great spiritually enlightened person remains in a state of eternal bliss, absolutely changeless in his or in her interaction with the external world at the individual level. This idea of the concept of unity of goal and diversity of means, unity of or oneness of destination, and the belief that if the goal is one, the paths, the means, the roads could be different. That's the idea. How this ideal influences civilizations. I mentioned earlier, one of the greatest historians of the last century was Arnold Toynbee, his study of history. Now, he gives a few examples how this great ideal of unity of goal and the permanence of our spiritual identity, Atman, how this influences not only our attitude at an individual level, but how it influences the attitudes of civilizations and culture. There is an interesting story, not a story, an event in fact. See, in the 7th century, when today's Iran, at that time it was known as Persia, it was overrun by the Arabs. That was the period of the Mohammedan conquest of the entire Middle East and also Near East. Now, when the Parsis who believed in the religion of Zoroastrian religion, they were fire worshippers. They were completely massacred or driven out of Persia. Today it's called Iran. So they came to India. They came to the west coast. So their chief priest had a bowl in his hands with a flame of fire, because they were worshippers of fire. This Parsi religion of Zoroastrianism and Rigveda, they are very similar. In fact, it is said that Rigveda, many of their ideas are taken from Rigveda Samhita, the earliest of the four Vedas. Because the first mantra of Rigveda Samhita, that is the most important, most ancient work of spiritual and religious culture in the world. Maybe about 7th millennium BC. 7th millennium, total 8,000 years old. The first mantra is Agnimile Purohidam Yajnasideva Murticham Hotaram Ratnadhatamam. The first phrase in the Rigveda is Agnimile, means we worship, we pray before, we pay our obeisance before the fire god. So this spiritual tradition of Rigveda also influenced Zoroastrian religion. But they were completely driven away from Iran. They came to India in the 7th century AD. So there was a Hindu king who welcomed them, coming all the way to the western coast, Arabian coast. They welcomed these refugees running away from Iran. And the chief priest was holding in his hands a bowl with a living flame. And the Hindu king asked about them, then they permitted them to stay, gave them a few villages or towns to settle down, and also handed over them some buildings to worship. I mean, they were allowed to convert the places, those Hindu temples, into the Parsi places of worship. Then the Hindu king asked him, how are you going to return? How are you going to thank you? What kind of gratitude are you going to show in return for our hospitality and generosity? The chief priest asked one of the courtiers to bring a bowl and then a little milk. So he filled the bowl with milk. Then he asked for a little sugar. Then he put the sugar into the milk and stirred. So he said, just as the sugar gets dissolved in the milk, similarly, we also will become part of your nation. Our paths may be different, but we all believe in the ideal of unity of goal and diversity of means. In response to this, the Hindu chief priest recited one verse from Rigveda, that is the first mandala 164 mantra, Indram Mitram Varunam Agnirahu Atho Divyasa Suparno Gurutman Ekam Sat Vipra Bahudha Vadanti Agnim Yamam Matarishwanamahu. It's a verse from Rigveda Samhita. The meaning is this. So you can just imagine how Gaudapada philosophy influenced a civilization. Gaudapada says that reality is one. That reality is immanent in all beings. It is also the all-pervading transcendental reality. That reality is our true nature. We can regain our true nature through spiritual practices. But practices are only so many means. Practices may differ from culture to culture. It could differ from nation to nation, from religion to religion. But the goal is to regain our true spiritual stature. There could be many means. That is the idea contained in the verse which the Hindu chief priest recited. That means he says, Indra, Mitra, Varuna, Agni, Matarishwa. All these are different names. Different names. People call the same reality, but they use different languages, different vocabularies, different terms and names. But the reality is one. So you can imagine the ideal of unity of goal and diversity of means. If goal is one, then paths could be different. The path need not be just one. It could be as many as there are human beings in the world. This idea behind. So we can imagine how a great metaphysical philosophy not only influences our attitude towards our fellow beings, but also decides and determines the growth and evolution of human civilizations. In the Gita we found how a spiritually enlightened person remains calm and quiet in the midst of his duties and responsibilities, in the midst of different events taking place. Still, that spiritually enlightened person remains calm and quiet because he does not think that he is a physical body. He does not think he is a mind or intellect. He thinks that he is identified the experience that he is Atman, supreme consciousness, the all-pervading, the omnipresent, the transcendental, immanent reality. That is the uniqueness of this teaching. Okay, I think I shall just, of course, the next verse we will take later in the next class. So I think we only have time. So if you have got anything, any point for clarification, you are most welcome. If you want to raise your questions in this class, we don't have much time right now. You can give in writing, but if you do have anything to ask right now, you are most welcome. We have just about 5 minutes more. Yes.
How is Atman related to the idea of prana?
Oh yes. Prana is the vital energy which is all-pervading at the macro level, universal level, cosmic level. But within the human body system, it functions. It is the same reality, but functions at 5 different levels. Prana, Udana, Vyana, Udana, Samana. I mean, depending upon the functions, they are given 5 different names. So, prana is an expression of this Atman. Prana is one expression of the Atman. In a way, it is not different from Atman, because without Atman, prana cannot exist. But prana is not the same as Atman. Prana is one of the vehicles through which Atman expresses. See, our emotions, ideas, emotions at the mental level, ideas at the intellectual level. My mental level is mana, intellectual is buddhi. 2 different levels. Prana at this still more subtle level. So, prana is one of the expressions, one of the vehicles through which Atman functions in the human body. When Atman withdraws itself from the body, pranas cannot function. When soul goes away, intellect, mind, pranas do not function. So, if you look at it from one point of view, prana is the same as Atman, because prana is an expression of Atman. But prana is not the same as Atman, because Atman expresses not only through prana, but through so many other means. all human functions are different expressions of this immanent, inner, presiding truth. That is Atman. As our immanent being, it is called Atman. As the all-pervading, omnipresent reality, it is called Brahman. It is the same. Excuse me? Buddha nature. Which nature?
The idea in Buddhism
Oh, yes.
or something like that. Would you say that's
Well, Buddhism, especially the Vijnanavada ideal, comes very close to this. Vijnanavada means Yogacara philosophy. It's called subjective idealism, sometimes called. See, for Buddhists, for Vijnanavadins, external things are unreal. They do not have an ontological status different from the ideas that present within us. So that's the idea. But these ideas cannot be present within the Vijnanam. It's called Chittam in Vijnanavada philosophy. Without Atman. So Chittam is also is an expression of Atman. So in a way we can say Yogacara philosophy is one type of interpretation of the universal truth. But one type of interpretation. Because Yogacara philosophy says that external things are unreal. They do not have an ontological status different from ideas. Now, and they say ideas are already stored up in the Vijnanam. So when you see the bay, you connect your Chittam with the bay idea because the bay idea is already present in the Vijnanam. So, but without the presentation of an external object, the bay idea will not arise in your Chitta mind. So external things are not totally unreal. That's what Vedanta says. Vedanta says external things are not totally unreal, not absolutely unreal, but they are not absolutely real. To be absolutely real, they should be eternal without any change. To be absolutely unreal, they should not even present as an idea. But the mountains and rivers and all the external empirical things are not totally unreal. You follow? They do have an existence, but their existence is relative because they undergo changes.
I guess I know what I'm trying to get at is what's the compatible way that Vedanta says Atman? What would the Buddhists say? Because they wouldn't say Atman, they would say something else. I'm trying to find harmony.
Yes, they use the word Vijnanam in Vijnanavada. And they use the word Shunya in Shunyavada. That's the idea. You can only compare Vedanta with the two schools of idealism, Shunyavada and Vijnanavada. In Shunyavadins, they use Shunya or doctrine of emptiness or voidness. In Vijnanavada, it's called the doctrine of Chittam or mind, Vijnana. That's all.
But Vedanta, Chitta and Atman are different.
In Vedanta, Chittam, the word Chittam is used in Vedanta to denote something else. It is only one of the compartments of the psychological system where memories are stored. But that is not the sense in which the word Chittam is used in Vijnanavada philosophy. There, Chittam is a platform in which ideas come and go. Momentary ideas, because they believe in what we call Kshanikavada, momentariness, But for these momentary thoughts to come and go, there should be a platform. That platform is Vijnana, according to them. That's the idea behind it. Yes. You can read books. There are many books written in recent times. Remember, these Buddhist literature, especially Buddhist idealistic philosophy, has got a huge extensive literature. There are different views. So even in Vijnanavada, there is one school of early Vijnana, which is called Ale Vijnanavada, which is different from Swatantra Vijnanavada, which came later, Dignaga's times and all that. So Buddhist philosophical literature was produced over a period of nearly 7 centuries. So what is presented here in these areas today is a very modified, simplified form of Vijnanavada, which is interpreted more or less in the vocabulary of psychology, not a metaphysics. Okay, that's it. Yes, thank you. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.